Today I will be presenting about and performing Fantasy and Variations on the Carnival of Venice by J.B. Arbin. So a little bit about the historical background of the piece. Niccolò Paganini, a violin virtuoso and composer, composed Il Carnevale di Venezia, Opus 40 in 1829. It is based off of a Neapolitan folk tune called O Mamma Mamma Cara, and he wrote 20 variations on the tune. This led to a popularization of the tune, and multiple other variations on the theme were written for various instruments, such as the cornet, trumpet, and euphonium. One of such variations was composed by Jean-Baptiste Arbin, which I will be performing and sharing about. As Paganini was very virtuosic in his performance, this showed in his compositions, which also translated over to Arbin's variation of Il Carnevale di Venezia, and is reflected within the virtuosic displays that come with the multiple articulation and fast tempos. So a little bit about Jean-Baptiste Arbin. He was a French cornetist, conductor, and a teacher who lived from February 28, 1825 to April 9, 1889. From 1841 to 1845, he studied trumpet at the Paris Conservatory with François d'Auvergne, who is generally credited for being the first to use the valve trumpet. He conducted for various salon orchestras, Arbin, and at the opera in 1856. And in 1857, he became the professor of saxhorn, which is a family of valved brass instruments, at the École Militare. He established the Conservatoire cornet class, where the origination of the separation of study of trumpet and cornet began. He taught there from 1869 to 1874, then went on to conduct a French orchestra, and this was in St. Petersburg and Pavlovsk, from 1873 to 1875, and again in 1876. And later he returned to teach in 1880 until his passing in 1889. Another contribution to the instrument itself is that he collaborated with the makers of and an engineer for cornet development in the hopes to improve intonation of brass instruments. As a notable technician on the cornet, he wrote the Grande Méthode complète pour cornet à piston des saxhorns in 1864, and this is a standard work for instruction and technique improvement. Some of his famous works include his arrangement of the Carnival of Venice, Fantasie Brillante, and variations on themes from Bellini's Norma and Verdi's La Traviata. So, just some information on Fantasy and Variations on the Carnival of Venice. The genre is a theme and variation in the key of concert E flat major. It was composed in the 1860s and within the Romantic era, with instrumentation of the solo cornet and piano. Being that Arbin was a notable technician of the instrument, Fantasy and Variations on the Carnival of Venice became the cornetist's solo piece as a means to show off a performer's technique during his and the next few generations. One of the well-known recordings of the piece is by Wynton Marsalis with Donald Hunsberger and the Eastman Wind Ensemble, and this was done September 1985. So now I will talk a little bit about the theme. The piece is comprised of a solo, which forms as an introduction to the theme and variations, and then moves on to the theme. The labeled theme section, which is partly shown here, is comprised of an A and B section. The A section is made up of the first 16 measures where the cornet plays and comprises the main theme. Multiple variations of the theme can be seen throughout the entirety of the piece, the first of which begins in the B section of this theme section, which can be seen on the slide, where it says variation 1/B. And the theme is from where it says A. So the harmonical analysis of the theme reveals the simplicity of the underlying harmonic progression. As mentioned previously, the key is concert E flat major, or F major as displayed relative to the B flat trumpet. The progression starts on 1, goes to 5/7, 5/7, and returns to tonic in each phrase. There are 4 phrases, whereas the first 2 and last 2 both have similarities with each other. For example, the first 2 both start with a pickup note of C and only vary within their first measures, minus the difference of 1 grace note, which happens in the second measure of each. With the other 2 phrases, the only difference is the last note, where the first one ends on the 3rd of the chord, and the second one ends on 1, and this brings the theme to a close. This simplistic harmonic progression later allows for the development of increasingly challenging technicalities. Here I would just like to reiterate the harmonic analysis by viewing the piano score, and as you can see, there's 1, 5/7, 5/7, 1, here, 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 and here, and it keeps on going. I will now discuss how the theme is embedded within variation 3 of the piece. In the B section of the variation, I would like to first point out the harmonic progression. It is the same 1, 5/7, 5/7, 1 that makes up the main theme. Now, to view how the theme fits in the variation, first I would like to point out the theme at the top to allow for comparison. Before the blue line is what is noticed within this part of the variation. I've highlighted the notes that are from the theme, and these notes are evidently part of the theme when comparing note by note. And you can see C, C, D here, D, and so forth. I would also like to point out the arrow in the 3rd line. Essentially, this D should be an F if it was exactly from the next phrase of the theme. However, the second phrase of the variation 3 does copy the first, and thus there is more simplicity in the notes from the theme. Therefore, a performer can relay the more complicated technical abilities that they have developed, and the repetition serves as an emphasis on what was just conveyed. Less differences in the notes of the theme here will cause the listener to have more focus on the actual technique of the player as well. Also, The ending measure includes an arpeggiation of F major, which begins and ends on A. This A corresponds to the ending note of the phrase of the theme, and rather than just ending on an A, an arpeggiation completes the demonstration of the performer and allows for a final flourish to end the phrase. Overall, this part of the variation on the theme incorporates the harmonics and notes of the theme and serves to allow the player to display their technique on the instrument. So now I will talk about how the variation 3 moves away from the theme. So this is the section of the B section of the variation 3. Again, the harmonic progression is the same 1, 5, 7, 5, 7, 1 that makes up the main theme, and there's a total of 4 of these progressions in this B section, as there is in the theme. Overall, this section does poorly with outlining the main theme. There is some correspondence between the two, for example, the pickup note of the C leading to F, like in the second phrase of the theme as highlighted, but any similarities are very inconsistent. What is evident is that this section has multiple flourishes on both tonic and dominant, outlining each with mainly scalar patterns, again landing on F on beat 1 for tonic and C for the dominant. The phrases could easily end there. However, an extra embellishment comes with the scalar pattern to the higher F or G. And that is, wait, can I write on this? Here and here. Thus, these passages mainly serve to illuminate the technical capacity of the player. So, not much is translated over, but the harmony is retained with the success of adding in complicated techniques to make a flamboyant part of the variation. This concludes my presentation, and as you can see, the theme is existent within the variation, but with many modifications for technical displays on the instrument, as was intended by Jean-Baptiste Arbin, and a reflection of Paganini's style. And here is the bibliography. And thank you.